Hi there, I'm Paige Alexander.
And I'm Jamie Morgan Reno.
We are two lifelong food addicts here to share simple solutions of how you can recover with us at Real Food Recovery. Together, we have over 100 years of experience in recovery because we've had over 100 years of experience in addiction.
The Real Food Recovery podcast exists to share simple solutions and habits that freed us from years of food obsession, and they can free you too. Hey there.
Hi,
Welcome. Episode 9, Real Food Recovery. Hey, Paige, how are you?
amazing. Excited. It's just so exciting every time we do another one. I'm thrilled.
Agreed. It has been so fun. We're now about to be 9 episodes in. And when we started talking about real food recovery and all of the ways that we recovered from our processed food obsessions, addiction, we really started talking a lot about the whole imagery, right, of the tree of life. And the tree of life really, food is at the center, right? The center of that trunk is the tree of life. And, our experience and our beliefs, really are the soil for that tree. And the branches of the tree are the recovery. And the fruit, right? The fruit on those branches was really all of the amazing gifts of recovery that we get from processed food addiction. And so it's important for us to break down. We have many branches on our recovery tree, but the first one, and the reason we put it first was because it's for us a branch that gave a lot of freedom
Right.
to us around processed food addiction. And that branch, the recovery branch, is called education. So it's a general term, but we really have very specific uses for it. So Paige,
Right.
I'll turn it to you here.
Sure. And that's a great point because education is always a good place to start. And we might even start out by asking, so why is it important? Why is it important in recovery? Why do we even bother talking about this? For me, education changed everything. Once I finally understood what was happening in my body and the science behind it, I had a place to start. I know that knowledge is power, and it finally gave me the ability. I wasn't a victim anymore. My awareness and my knowledge and education, it gave me a starting place where I could start to fight back. I'm putting on the gloves, the
Yeah.
fighting gloves, and I'm ready now because I'm not powerless. What about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, education about how addictive foods impacted me all those years that I ate them. I mean, and I didn't just eat them, I used them. It really helped me understand that these foods are designed to compromise our health, compromise our longevity, compromise the vitality that we're born with. And it freed me from the story that I had in my head that I was broken. Honestly, the education freed me. I walked around most of my life thinking there was something wrong with me. There was something wrong with my metabolism or something wrong with my being, because I could not regulate myself around food.
Mhm.
And no matter how hard I tried and how hard others tried, it just couldn't happen. And so when I realized the education component of how information was put together to educate folks about how these foods are made, how our bodies react to them, how our brains react to them, it was like freedom. I couldn't believe how free I felt. And especially when we think about the marketing side of it, right? The education around processed food and marketing, especially the children, makes me extremely grateful for the knowledge in my own life, because I was one of those children that was,
Right.
by the marketing, but it also makes me outraged. And I want to get this word out there because, our children's brains are being hijacked at a very young age by so many things. Processed food is one of them, and I think one of the most dangerous things out there.
I agree with that. Do you have, of everything do you have any piece of information that you've learned in recovery that you think is more important than another?
There's so much. I don't know that I can narrow it down, but for me, understanding the way our brain works, and you've mentioned this on past episodes, Paige, how our brains believe what we tell it. So if we tell it we're strong, and we tell it that we thrive on whole foods, and we tell it that you know, we can do hard things, and you know, we have all the time in the world, or whatever those recovery lessons are, our brain believes it. If, you know, just like for me, if I tell my brain that I'm not a very good sleeper, I'm not a very good sleeper. So you'll rarely hear me say that phrase. But for years, I told my brain and my body, I have a slow metabolism. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I have no willpower. You know, my brain believed it. And my brain believed all those stories, and I internalized them and made them part of who I was. So my body acted that way. And about 2 years ago now, I got, you know, as part of my recovery journey, I wore a continuous glucose monitor for a little while, and it really measured my metabolism, right? And how it responded to different kinds of foods throughout the day, with stressful events and non-stressful events. It was really eye-opening. And I got, you know, the report that I got from my doctor, you know, she kind of went through all of my numbers. She's like, your metabolism is wonderful. Like it's thriving. It's there's nothing wrong with your metabolism. Whatever was sluggish in your metabolism has been healed. And she said, and it was the food that healed it, and your activities around your recovery that healed your metabolism. So no longer do I believe that I'm broken, or I have this, you know, metabolism that you know, keeps me back, so to speak. And that, I think, is the biggest piece of me truly believing what I tell myself.
Yeah, I think for me, mine is a little different. It was that huge, probably one of my biggest light bulb moments of understanding the difference between the frontal lobe and the center brain, and how there can't be blood flow in both places. So when you get a craving, all the blood flow just goes back to the center brain, and you're left, you know, naked and afraid here in the frontal lobe, where our logic system, our braking system, our long-term consequences in the moment. Consequences are irrelevant whenever this center brain has all the blood flow. It's robbed. And that gave me an opportunity to go. I started crying. I mean, I think I've told this story before, that I was driving down the highway and I was listening to this podcast, and where that was the first time I had really understood that. And it was such a relief to know there was nothing wrong with me. My body was reacting exactly
Exactly the
as
way
it should have. But
Yeah.
now that I understand it, again, I can fight back, because I can start working on skills of I'm safe now. In other words, I'm safe. I have something I can work with. I have something that I can navigate. I can figure out how to bring that the blood flow back. And what do I do when cravings come up? Now I understand cravings are just thoughts. That was something else I learned. They will pass. Getting comfortable with uncomfortable. I've talked about this a lot, my little breathing trick of
Yes.
cradling your face. For those that you can't see me, that are just listening, you cradle your cheeks, and 3 times you just say, "You're okay. You're okay. You're okay." And you might even not be in a position where you can cradle your cheeks if you're in a grocery store or restaurant, but you can still repeat 3 times, "You're okay."
Yeah.
And your brain again will believe it. So that, I think, was literally it saved my life. It was that significant for me. So, you know, we start to get into the story of where tobacco industry became big food back in the 70s. I don't know if you're much younger than me, but do you remember the Marlboro Man?
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, was he not the cat's meow?
I was too young. I was too young to be attracted to men at
Okay.
that point, but I
I
do
mean,
remember him,
I
and he
mean, I
was a
was
very manly man.
Yeah, I mean, I might have only been 10 and didn't know much, but I was Twitter pated in the heart whenever I saw him. I'm like, that's who I want to marry. The vest, the bandana, the hat, the horse, the scruff, all of that, the dirt on the face. I mean, all of it was like, again, I was just a little girl, but I knew that's who I wanted to marry. So back then, tobacco, and I remember this as a little girl because I'm that much older than you, that there were ads in magazines, TVs, commercials everywhere for cigarettes, and then people started dropping like flies. tobacco industry could no longer advertise. So they went in and bought all the big food and then just applied that same addiction business model to the Nabisco, General Mills, Hershey's, those types of things, and uh, had engineers come in and concoct these foods in air quotes to the highest bliss point of adding the salt, oil, sugar, and before you knew it, they knew that this would addict our brains, but they didn't let us know. So they did it without our knowledge and permission, and then diabolically started advertising with, made it available, affordable, taking cartoons from 50 to 500 and really targeting this younger age. So that is how that got started. And here we are in grocery stores. They're buying up real estate on eye level shelving and end caps and displays, and fast food restaurants caught on to the marketing and the advertising. But it really, once you understand what's going on in the grocery stores, especially, it really opens your eyes to see what's happening, and you're able to look at it through a different lens. You are able to look at it from a place of protection and disgust. And I'm not playing that game.
No.
I'm not a part of that.
No, agreed. And it's so interesting because, the Marlboro Man, I think that, I don't know, it's a joke, but it's actually true, right? That they say the Marlboro Man died of lung cancer. So they created a world of food addicts, right? So, when you think about, for me, big tobacco, right? When we know that they were hit with lawsuits in the 70s, and that essentially, they were now not only taxed, but they were warning labels. There were huge campaigns in healthcare organizations and nationally in media channels about the dangers of smoking. I don't know if and if viewers know, that big tobacco is now big food.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's sad, but it helps to have that education and know, because then we're in a position to do something about it. So, what do you think the benefits are of education for recovery from processed food addiction? For me, it was a total game changer in the sense that um, you can be positive and start reframing this. You can hone your skill in reframing negatives to positive, which was a huge benefit for us in recovery. That's one of our biggest skills, is reframing the negative to the positive, and it decreases the stress load because the stress pathway in the brain activates the craving pathway. And that, once you have that skill, it travels with you wherever you go.
I agree. Yeah, for me, the benefits of education, when you're talking just earlier about with marketing, and I understood that big tobacco, when they, RJ Reynolds became RJ Nabisco, and that, RJ Reynolds was big tobacco, was one of the big tobacco companies. And once I understood that, hey, they have shifted their business model to, instead of marketing cigarettes to young people, and now even children, like with Joe Campbell and some of those other marketing campaigns they had towards the end of their heyday. Now I see them transferring, right? When they had all these government lawsuits slapped on them, the tobacco company said, hey, we're going to right turn, and we're going to go into food and manufacturing and craving manufacturing. And we're going to, now either you tell us you can't sell cigarettes to kids, and we're going to go ahead and sell processed food to kids directly. And they're going to, we're going to market to them at even younger ages, starting at age 2, 3, 4, whenever they're able to start watching television on their own, we're going to start marketing to them. So big tobacco became big food. And for me, that was a benefit to understand, because I understood that I was not this out of control, rule powerless, food machine. I was in some ways a victim being marketed to very intentionally by the food industry at a very, very young age. My brain was not even by the food hijacked, because it was hijacked by the marketing.
Oh, that's it for sure.
So that was a game changer. very intentional with the imagery, the sounds, the smells, the placement, the location selection, all of it to maximize, like we talked about, the stress pathway is activated. And that frontal lobe is offline. Where can we get them right there?
Mhm.
They are strategic in how they place the food commercial, the fast food commercial, right after a cliffhanger scene on a TV show. Because
Right.
people are stressed out, and then they see a fast food commercial and they think stress, oh, that pizza looks good, I'm gonna call them and get that pizza.
Uh-huh. Yeah. They're not dumb. They're very, very good at what they
You
do.
are, it is called programming for a reason.
Oh,
Television
that's
programming is it's a very specific word.
I have
Really
never
very
heard
confusing.
that. Brilliant. So we have this education. The next
Yeah.
question then becomes, what do we do about it? How do we apply it into our recovery? What are the best ways to take advantage of this education? For me, one of the things that I learned is I can structure my path any way I want. I don't have to go fast. I don't have to go slow. I just have to work on what's right for me. I work on my food in the most comfortable way. I work on my emotions. I work on the ability to be flexible in tough situations when you have to decide between good, better, and best.
Yep.
And one of the biggest ahas for me that I learned about recovery that was so helpful is if I have a slip, it's okay. You're not kicked out of recovery.
Exactly.
We talk about this a lot about climbing the staircase. If you trip and fall on a stair, you don't go all the way back down to the bottom. You just get up where you are, dust off, and pick up your basket of laundry and keep on going. That for me was learning that I can make a plan for myself, whatever fits my needs. That's just a-okay.
Got
What
it.
are you thinking?
Yeah, for me, the best way to integrate it, I am a big fan of personality assessments. I'm in the human resource world in my day job, and so I'm a big fan of learning about myself, and I know enough about myself through personality assessments and feedback from others that I have a sort of lifelong learning lens. I'm always thinking about what can I learn, and sometimes I think about what can I teach others. So I have to be careful about who I'm talking to and when I pull that lever. But most of the time, it's what can I learn. So I always stay open and childlike and curious. Sometimes a little too childlike, but usually it serves me well. I'm a student of the game, constant student of the game. For 15 years, I have immersed myself. I have an MD in process food addiction recovery. It's just not from there's no institution that offers it.
Yeah.
But as far as the number of years that I put into my education, I'm always reading, I'm always listening, I'm always studying and exposing myself to thought leaders, not gurus, they're not my gurus, but they are thought leaders. They're people that I learn from, the science, the research, and also the other addicts, right? The other addicts.
Oh, yeah.
I immerse myself in the podcasts like ours and lectures and recovery talks and books. And, again, they have wisdom, these authors, these speakers, these researchers, and these addicts. They have wisdom to share. I have wisdom and science to share. And that makes an absolute difference in recovery over time.
Oh, I agree completely. That's wonderful. Yeah, we really felt strongly about doing a podcast on education because it just changes your world. It opens you up to new ideas, and you are no longer a victim. You become powerful once you understand because you've got something to work with. You are now in a position to make a plan and have a free life, a life free from the processed food addiction. So excellent, very, very good. Do you have anything else to say on this topic before we go to a few viewer questions?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to share because it was you asked earlier about there's one thing or a really helpful thing about my education of this addiction. For me, I think if I could narrow it down to one thing, it would be this image of, a circle within a circle. And the inner circle was things I can control, right? And it said my thoughts, my reactions,
Mm.
my expectations, my words, my habits, all those things were in things I can control circle. And then the outside circle around that one was titled things out of my control. Other people, other people's opinions, the world, you name it, right? Anything outside of me, other people's thoughts, other people's expectations, the weather, the traffic, fill in the blank, right? Everything out of my control. That was immensely helpful. And I'll tell you a quick story, Paige, about my day and how I applied education today.
Please. Mm-hmm.
So processed food addiction recovery education. So I had a quite a day. I'm here in New Jersey for some work and family events, and I decided not to rent a car, so I decided to borrow a car from a friend, and took the car this morning for the first time, and was driving to a meeting, an important work meeting with a mentor, and he's at a level in my company, you don't want to be late for this meeting.
No.
And about I left, something told me to leave an hour early. And I thought, you know what? That's recovery in action. I'm gonna give myself an extra hour, get on the road, and I'm gonna just have a nice relaxing time. I know education's taught me in recovery that giving myself extra time when I can helps me keep my recovery brain front and center, right? A lot of the frontal lobe. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, the battery light comes on, and I thought, well, he told me that there were some issues with the car, that mechanical issues. So I just assumed that he knew the battery light was on, and it was just part of the process. So I just kept going, and I knew there were mechanical issues. So I just thought, well, if we just drove the car, it's probably fine. And then the radio turns off, and I thought, that's interesting. And then and I'm on a major highway, several lanes. And, I was smart enough to not be going with traffic by that point. I was in the right lane, and I was like, okay, something's going on. So I was slowing down, making sure I could still brake, making sure all of that. And I'm consciously thinking like, okay, I have a choice. What are my choices? Stay calm. What are my choices? And the car, more things started turning off in the car. The speedometer went down to 0, but I was still going 40, 50 miles an hour. It went down to 0. All of the gauges just bottomed out. And I'm like, okay. And I saw a sign, and it said, 1.5 miles rest area. And I'm like, perfect. Let me just get to this rest area. So I get to the rest area, and I cruise into a spot, and the car just dies.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was, I had another conference call I had to be on. So I'm like, okay, I'm at a rest area. I'm safe. Car is safe. Everyone's fine. No problems. Except there's a stranded car here now, but I have a meeting to get to. What's my next priority? Get on the phone call that I had. Tell my coworkers, hey, I'm going to be on for a few minutes while I'm getting an Uber. Gonna get an Uber to corporate. And I'm staying calm. I asked for help at the gas station that I was parked near to see if maybe it was something simple they could help me with. It wasn't. And I left the key for the owner, got in my Uber, got to my meeting. Quietly before my meeting with this executive, I talked to his assistant about maybe if she knew of any rental discounts for my company. And stayed calm the whole time. I didn't become frazzled. And then I went to the meeting and said nothing to my mentor, and had a great meeting. And then on the way out, she gave me some rental car information, and my mentor said, "You need a rental car to get back to Texas?" And I said, "Oh no, I just need one to get back home." And his assistant to my local home, and his assistant said, "She didn't tell you the car broke down on the highway on her way in?" He's like, "No." And I thought, this is recovery in action. Calm, collected. What is my next right move? What do I need to do to keep my blood flow centered in my brain? And I just kept doing the next right thing, the next thing on my schedule. And man, the knowledge that I have of doing that in situations like this, I was able to text a coworker who was local at the office with me. He lives nearby. So he drove me home from the corporate office right to a rental car place. I was able to rent a car, stay calm, and the whole time, because of education, I had my little bag of clean food with me. So when my stomach growled, and it did, of course, because my meal timing was a little bit off today,
Yeah.
I ate my clean food when I could get a moment here or there. And I got home, walked in the house, and here I am. No worse for the wear.
Amazing.
This car stranded about 20 miles away, but can control what I can control.
That is a beautiful story. And rarely, so you're a rare bird. We already know that about you, that you are 1% of 1% of 1% of people in the universe. And this is a prime example of where we can get to in recovery. I'm not sure I'm where you are as far as staying that calm, but you have to compartmentalize when you're in a professional position. You're like, I'm going to take these emotions, I'm going to set them over on a shelf. I will come back and get them a little bit later. Right now, I've got to do this meeting.
Yep.
And brilliant. And you're right. You could have had a huge meltdown, but that would have not started that car again.
Nope.
You could have rolled around on the ground. You could have thrashed your arms. You could have screamed and yelled.
Mhm.
That would not make that radio come back on.
That's right. Or the car start, believe me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And
And yeah, just doing the next right thing. We learn to do that.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And best part, well, not the best part, but the bonus part is that I got an upgrade on the car rental. So,
There you go. Silver
Yeah.
linings. We always look for silver linings in recovery too. Okay. Let's get into a few listener questions. First one is, I just don't have the time it takes to devote to being healthy, food prep, exercise, listening to podcasts, etc. So whenever people say this, and I'm usually just so sweet, but I usually come straight back with, do you have time to be sick? Because that is very expensive to our schedule, and it takes less time to do food prep than it does to stop and start and stop and start and stop and start every day. And especially when you're not organized with a plan.
Less time, less energy too. It's so
Oh,
much
totally.
energy.
Totally. I talk about whenever I get a bill in the mail, I stop, take care of it right then, turn it. I like to take care of things immediately, but yes, it's a huge time saver to do the food prep. And I love listening to podcasts while I'm doing it. So I turn it into a joy. And now
Yes.
I like listening to our podcasts while I'm doing my
I know
task.
it's fun.
I look forward to it. What
It is
do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't have the time. I don't want to spend the money on being sick. Do you know how, when I work in healthcare and I see in the hospitals I am in for work, I see the patients and their families. I see them sitting with the family members sitting in the cafeterias or at the, in the common areas of the hospital on the phone with insurance companies, with pharmacies, and the look on their face and the words out of their mouth are nothing but frustration and angst and worry, and their loved one is recovering or maybe going through a medical emergency. And I think to myself, I would bet 80% of whatever that is happening in this hospital is preventable.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really breaks my heart because, I hear people say, I don't have the time. I get it. I totally get it. But what you prioritize is where you put your time.
Yes.
So, I don't have the time. I ask myself whenever I hear that self-talk coming from inside of me, I was like, hold on, sister, how many minutes have you scrolled today?
Oh, yeah.
How many, let's time it. Let's figure you've got the time. You're just not prioritizing. It's not that you don't have the time. It's you don't have the priority. And no harm, no foul. Like maybe you're not at the place that you need and want to prioritize this in your life. I get it. But don't sell yourself short and say you don't have the time. That's not true.
Yeah, no, I agree that we find the time for the things that are of the greatest importance. And this is a life-changing, life-saving priority. We've talked in here about food is the number one preventable cause of disease,
Yep.
and that 1.6 million Americans are dying every year from diet-related disease. So you're right. When you see these people,
I
these
think those
family
stats are wrong.
members,
Yeah,
yeah, I guarantee you that food is a big major contributor to why our hospitals are full and overflowing.
absolutely. And, when I think about, if I say to myself, I don't have the time to food prep, I I immediately think about those family members on the phone, or the people laying in hospital beds. And do I have the time to do that, to sit on the phone for hours with insurance companies and payers and trying to organize finances to pay for medical procedures that are totally preventable?
Yeah,
Or do I want to take 2-3 hours a week total
right.
and prep all of my food so I can have clean, amazing meals? Today, do you know where my car coasted into a spot? My car coasted into a spot 50 feet away from an entrance to one of those rest areas with all of the fast food restaurants.
Hmm.
I was super stressed, and I immediately thought, of course, and I'm like doing the self-talk and keeping myself calm. And I thought, I have my clean food right here, because I had taken the time this morning to pack it. And while I was waiting for that Uber, I had time. I'm sure if I really didn't have the priority, I could have said, well, I'm just going to go get, a comfort food inside there while I wait for this Uber to pick me up. But no, I didn't, because I had prioritized differently. I was able to make a different choice, and I was able to stay in my frontal lobe because of the clean food, instead of having food that takes me out of my frontal lobe back to my addiction brain.
So smart. That could have looked completely different. Brilliant. Yeah, I take my food when I travel. If I know I'm going to be away for my mealtime, I always make sure that I have it as well.
It's just not
Brilliant.
optional.
Yeah,
So,
it's very, very expensive to be sick for everyone.
sure. Oh gosh, yeah. It's expensive in time, and it's, of course, in finances and other resources.
Oh,
But I mean, I don't know about you, Paige, but I don't want to spend my life talking to people over the phone about insurance claims.
no.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
Not for something that's preventable. Don't get me wrong. We all have
Right.
extenuating circumstances, but I'm talking about for preventable things.
I
No.
agree. I agree.
So viewer question 2, I want to eat healthier, but I share a home with people who eat a lot of junk food. What do I do? What would you
Do
tell them?
you- I'm sorry. I know it's hard. And sometimes it just starts with a conversation with your kids, your spouse, if it's possible for them to keep their food in a certain cupboard. My husband has his quote unquote cupboard that I do not go in unless I'm jonesing for something. And I just try to be a quiet example of the way I want to live my life. The other day, we were picking up our twin daughters. We take them on Sundays to church with us. And one of them, they know I don't eat sugar. They're 4. One
Twin
of them got in the
granddaughters?
car. Huh?
Twin granddaughters?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
granddaughters.
Mhm.
One of them, when they were getting in the car, she says, Grandma, I'm not going to eat any sugar today, and I'm going to be a good girl. Both of those things were lies, by the way. But it's a starting point. At least she obviously doesn't know what sugar is, but she just knew that was something that would be pleasing to me to
Right.
hear. And she is a rascal, which made her say that anyways. She's high spirited. So it was just funny that I'm setting a quiet example. And believe me, please, I want everyone to listening. I am never telling the grandkids, oh no, don't eat that.
Right.
I just do my thing. And if it comes up and they offer me a bite of something of theirs, I just say, Grandma doesn't eat sugar. And so they know from a young age, that's just not something I do. So setting just a quiet example, never pushing, never preaching. I just do
No.
my own thing. But maybe there's things you can do, like ask your family, can we have a healthy dinner once a week? Or if you can try and eat your breakfast and lunch on your own and just choose to join your family for dinner and have healthy options there to choose from. And maybe we don't make it about the food, we make it about movement and just say, maybe we can
Right.
take a walk after dinner. Just
Yeah.
invite those types of things. What
Yeah.
about you? How do you do it?
Yeah, well, for the first, when I really understood, right, that I was addicted, I had a handful of years, not many years, but a handful of years that I was by myself, living by myself. So I could completely control my food environment, and processed food did not come into the home. I was very careful about restaurants, and I really just had control over my environment. And then I met and married my husband, and life relocated me away from, that food environment that was totally plain, to living with him and his elderly father. And, while my husband was very happy to come off of the processed foods that
Mm.
he was consuming, and he eats clean, I would say 90% of the time now. It's really
Oh,
how he's turned his food around. But I was dealing with a man in his 80s, and who's actually a fast food industry veteran, right? He worked in the
mm-hmm.
industry for years and had no interest in getting out of the food. And I thought, okay, I need to make sure that I explained to him, it was a home that was had a lot of processed food, a home that standard American diet, Midwestern standard American, put meat on your bones kind of diet, so they say. Um, and a lot of TV, just nonstop television on. And that has a ton of ads, as we know, we just talked about. So I sat down and I thought, how do I explain this to this man who doesn't understand what food addicts need, who doesn't really know me as his daughter-in-law, to know my history or any of that. And I thought, well, so I just said, hey, by me living here in this home with all of this, it's called it junk food, and commercials for junk food, you're basically asking an alcoholic to move into a bar and try to recover from alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And he totally got it. He's like, oh, I could never do that. I said, okay, what can we do? I have some ideas. And he said, great, let's hear it. And I said, well, could you put your junk food in? We have 2 fridges. We had a fridge in another area of the home. Could you put your junk food there? Yep. Can we relocate the non-fridge junk food into its own cupboard underneath over here where I don't see it? Yep. If you bring junk food into the home, can you eat it out of my site? Yep. Oh,
Nice.
can you put a TV in this part of the house that you can have on 24/7? And would you like some earphones? Yep, I'm having a hard time hearing anyway. Here you go. So within maybe, well, it was a few days, right? I moved in, and by month 3 or so, we were at that point where, even the TV cues from the commercials were in his ear. So it has been a journey, and it's certainly stressful for me to go from a totally controlled food environment that really, celebrated my recovery and enhanced it to that environment. But that's how I was able to approach it with him. And I always say, if I can get an 80-year-old to do something different, an 80-year-old Midwest farmer, by the way, to do something different with his food, then anyone can.
Yeah. I loved your approach to him too. It wasn't you will do this and you will do
Okay.
that. That just never works. So brilliant.
I was moving into a home that we were sharing with him. I looked at it as, the man's home is his castle. I can't come in demanding. So
Very smart. Very smart. Well, I love it. So those are our thoughts about education, and we really hope that you have gleaned something from this as much as we have, and we just love that you are with us. We are all in this together, and we just appreciate you being here and supporting Real Food Recovery. Bye, guys.
thanks, Paige.